Everyone keeps asking the same question. Why is housing so expensive? Is it the greedy sellers? Is it investors? Is it foreign buyers? Is it the builders? Or is it the realtors or the banks? Sure, everyone's got a role, but today I want to talk to you about the villain nobody wants to call out, the government. Because every time there is a shortfall, what do? They don't say maybe we should spend better. They don't say maybe we should approve housing faster. They don't say we should perhaps stop creating layers and layers of cost. No, they say let's tax more, and not just tax more. Let's be creative. Let's hide it inside the home price. Let's hide it inside the development charges. Let's hide it inside land transfer tax. Let's hide it inside the HSC. Let's hide it inside permit delays. Oh my God. Let's make the buyer borrow more money than call it affordability. Welcome back to the Angry Realtor Show. I'm Roshan Bastard, your Angry Realtor, and today we are talking about how government turned home buyers into ATMs. Not homeowners, not families, not first-time buyers, ATMs. Because every time someone buys a home, every level of government shows up at the closing table with their hand out. And then these same people stand in front of the podium and say, we care about affordability. No, you don't. You care about the revenue stream. So let's start with Toronto, because Toronto is the perfect example of how government thinks. Back in 2008, the city of Toronto introduced its own municipal land transfer tax. That means Toronto buyers pay a municipal land transfer tax on top of the Ontario provincial land tax. Toronto tax officially took effect on February 1, 2008. There was an outcry. Everyone hated it. And now, 20 years later, no one says anything. It's become the part of life. So think about this. You save for years. You skip vacations. You cut back. You live with your parents longer than you wanted. You finally get approved for a mortgage. You find a house. You actually win the offer. And before you even get the keys, government says, congratulations, now pay us. Not once, twice. Provincial land transfer tax, municipal land transfer tax. Because apparently to live in Toronto, one land transfer tax wasn't enough. They needed a second one. And this is where I get angry, because they call it public policy. I call it a cover charge to home ownership. You want to buy a home? Pay the province. You want to buy that home in Toronto? Pay the city too. You want affordability? Shut up and pay. And then wonder why young buyers are tapped out before they even move in. Now, let's stop talking theory. Let's do the math, because this is where the whole thing becomes disgusting. Let's say a first-time buyer buys a $1 million home in Toronto. And before anybody says, oh, first-time buyer, $1 million home must be luxury. What a privilege. No. In Toronto and the GTA, $1 million is not luxury. $1 million can be a small semi, a basic townhome, a tired detached house needing work, or simply a condo townhouse. Don't think dream home. That don't exist. Just a regular home with a ridiculous price tag. Now, for $1 million purchase, the minimum down payment in Canada is not simply 5% of the whole price. The minimum is 5% on the first $500,000 and 10% on the amount above $500,000 up to $1.5 million. So on $1 million purchase, the minimum down payment requirement is $75,000. So here is the math. Purchase price $1 million, minimum down payment $75,000. Basic mortgage $925,000. But wait, because the buyer has less than 20% down, now they need mortgage default insurance. And for a loan to value between 90.01% and 95%, the CMHC premium is 4% of the mortgage amount. In Ontario, that premium is also subject to provincial sales tax, and that tax cannot be added to the mortgage. So now, basic mortgage $925,000, CMHC insurance premium at 4% $37,000, new mortgage balance $962,000. Let that sink in. The buyer puts down $75,000 and still starts with a mortgage of $962,000. $75,000. That is insane. They saved $75,000 and the system basically says, cute, here is your almost $1 million mortgage. Now let's add land transfer tax. On $1 million Toronto purchase, the combined Ontario-Toronto land transfer is about $32,950 before first-time buyer rebates. If they qualify as a first-time buyer, then they get rebates of $8,475 combined. So they still pay around $24,475 in land transfer tax. Before moving costs, before legal fees, before title insurance, before adjustment, before utility costs, before furniture, before reports, before the first mortgage payment. So roughly down payment $75,000, land transfer tax after rebate $24,475, PST on CMHC premium $2,900, legal and closing estimate $2,500, total cash needed around $105,000. And remember, this buyer did not put 20% down payment. This buyer is not walking in rich. This is the buyer trying to get into the market with the minimum required. And the system says, welcome to homeownership. Please bring 6 figures in cash and also take this $962,000 mortgage. What the are we doing? Now, this is the part that drives me crazy. If you have 20% down, you avoid mortgage default insurance. But if you don't have 20%, you pay the insurance. So the person with the less money pays more. Think about how backward that is. The young buyer pays more. The first-time buyer pays more. The new immigrant pays more. The family trying to get started pays more. And then we have the nerve to call this an affordability system. No, it is not. This is a debt loading system. And yes, I understand why mortgage insurance exists. I understand lender protection. I understand risk. But from the buyer's point of view, here is what happens. You don't have enough down payment, so you pay a premium. That premium gets added back to your mortgage, and then you pay interest on that premium for decades to come. So you are not just paying for the house. You are paying interest on the insurance that you were forced to take because you didn't have enough money in the first place. That's not affordability. That's punishment with paperwork. Now, let's talk about development charges for a second. This is the invisible part most buyers don't see. When a new home is built, municipalities charge development charges to help pay for growth-related infrastructure. Toronto says these charges help fund things like roads, transit, water, sewer, parks, rec, and libraries, and even the emergency services. Fine, in theory, that makes sense. Growth should pay for growth. But somewhere along the way, growth should pay for the growth turned into new buyers should pay for every infrastructure failure we didn't plan for over the last 25 years. This is the problem because when development charges rises, builders don't magically eat all of that cost. It just gets baked into the home price. And who pays the price? The buyers. And if the buyer finances the home, they don't just pay the development charge once. They pay it through their mortgage with interest over 25 or 30 years. This means a government fee becomes part of the mortgage for life. A municipal charge becomes part of the monthly payment. A political decision becomes household debt. This is the scam. And then government says, we need to make housing more affordable. Buddy, you are inside the price. You are not outside the problem looking in. You are baked into the cake. They keep saying development charges are for infrastructure. Fine. But after decades of land transfer tax, property taxes, HST, permit fees, parkland fees, development charges, why is the answer still always, we need more money? At some point, this isn't infrastructure planning. It's a gravy train with a hard hat on. Now talk about permits. Permit delays are not just paperwork. Every month of delay adds carrying cost, interest, interest, legal fees, and risk. Where does that cost go? Right back into the buyer's mortgage. A delayed permit becomes a hidden tax. HST's government says we need more housing. Then they tax new housing. Then new housing becomes too expensive. Then they announce rebates and expect applause. That's not affordability. That's stepping on your foot and then asking for credit because they moved their shoe half an inch. Now they say a 30-year mortgage helps affordability. Nope, they don't make the house cheaper, they make the debt longer to pay. Your parents bought a home and they actually paid it off. Today's buyer gets a subscription plan for debt for life. This is not an avocado toast problem. Older owners got equity, younger buyers got debt. One generation paid off homes, the next generation is financing government failure through bigger mortgages, bigger taxes, and longer amortizations. Ask yourself, who is carrying this system now? Young buyers, first-time buyers, new immigrants, growing families. They came chasing the Canadian dream, and the system handed them a 7-figure mortgage and said, "Welcome, please finance our infrastructure backlog." And even if you pay off the mortgage, you are still not done because property taxes never ends. You finish paying the bank, then you keep paying the city. You don't stop paying for shelter ever. You just change who collects it. So now let's bring this home. The end game is not affordability. The end game is government subsidy through housing. That's what this has become. Instead of fixing spending problems, tax housing. Instead of speeding up approvals, charge more fees. Instead of building infrastructures efficiently, push the cost into new homes. Instead of making homes cheaper, stretch amortizations. Instead of reducing debt, normalize bigger mortgages. Instead of helping buyers build wealth, turn them into long-term debt carriers. And then they say, we are taking action on affordability. No, you're not. You are taking action on optics. The buyer is taking action on debt, and the homeowner is taking action on survival. That's the truth. So next time a politician stands at a podium and says, we are fighting for housing affordability, ask them this, then why is every level of government standing at the closing table with their hands out? Why does the buyer pay land transfer tax? Why does the Toronto buyer pay it twice? Why are development charges buried inside the price? Why is the HST attached to new housing? Why do permit delays add cost? Why does the buyer with less than 20% pay more? Why do we call 30-year debt affordability? Why does every solution somehow makes the buyer borrow more money? Because that is not affordability. This is a payment plan for government failure. And the most insulting part, they act like they are helping. They say, we are moving homeownership possible. No, you made it more expensive. Then you made the mortgage bigger. Then you made the amortization longer. Then you call it help. That's not help. That's a scam with a press release. Your parents bought homes. Today's buyers are buying government debt with a front door attached. And until we admit that, we are going to keep blaming everyone except the people who built the machine. I'm Roshan Basnet and this is the Angry Realtor Show. And if this episode made you angry, good, because maybe it's time homeowners, buyers, builders, and taxpayers start asking the same question. How much of this housing crisis is actually government made? And don't even get me started with land restrictions for new housing development. I mean, talk about where I live, Oakville, Burlington, especially Burlington. The north of Dundas is all free land. But the city says, nope, you can't build homes there. And they say we are running out of land. That's for the next time. See you again.